Welcome to Conversations with Doc Martin. This video series focuses on extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Today, we're joined by Manley Feinberg, who's recognized as an award-winning international keynote speaker, business leader, and author, whose work has been featured on NBC, CBS, ABC, and Fox, as well as other global publications. By reverse engineering decades of failures and successes in business and the mountains, which we'll talk about, Manley brings a unique perspective that not only equips, but inspires you to step up as a leader and reach your next summit. During Manley's 11 years with Build-A-Bear Workshop, he helped take the revolutionary retail concept from 40 stores to over 400 worldwide, realizing revenue growth from 55 million to over 474 million, and a successful IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. Manley's leadership influence contributed to a workshop culture and a workplace culture that landed Build-A-Bear on the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list 4 years in a row. And last but certainly not least, on a personal note, Manley likes sleeping on the side of mountains. We're going to talk about that. And more shocking, as he says, that his wife has still been putting up with him after 28 years and his 2 teens that still kiss him on the cheek in front of their friends, which is a mountain to climb in and by itself. So Manley, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks, Martin. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have so much to unpack. You've had such an amazing career. As I shared, you're an accomplished author. And so let's kind of jump in, I guess, to a little bit of your background and kind of how you ended up with this whole vertical lessons concept.
Yeah, so my life is kind of, my adult life at least, is kind of been on 3 tracks that are roughly parallel, but all interlinked. And so I have this passion that I developed in college to climb anything, snow, ice, mountains, rock. I like really technical rock is my favorite type of climbing, but I've done all the different disciplines. And so that started in college. And then at about that same time, about 6 months after I started climbing, I met my wife now, my girlfriend at first, of course. So the family thing kind of paralleled that. The climbing piece is just the coolest place I could go anywhere in the U.S. or in the world I could get to. I'll climb basically anything I can get my hands on. So, and then was developing this relationship and trying to keep my wife, trying to get her to delay having kids as long as I could. To be super transparent. I could have been talked in or out of having kids. And I do remember a funny little side story. I haven't talked about this on my podcast, but the very first date, I was getting ready to take her climbing actually on her very first date. She had invited me to a dance, but during that day, I said, "You want to go climbing for the day?" She said, "Sure." And she gets in the car and I said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And she said, "I want to have kids." And I'm sure I had this deer in the headlights look. I'm like 19 or 20 at the time, 20. And she said, she picked up on it. She said, "Well, you don't have kids?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'd love to have children." So I was immediately attractive. And I knew what to say, don't blow this, man. It's like the date just started.
Exactly.
Then the third piece of that is when we got back from, we took a trip right after college and lived in the back of our a little 2x4 truck with a camper topper. It was like basically the van life you see that's kind of popular now. Before it was popular, and when only surfers and climbing bums did that on a regular basis. So we did that for a year, and after that, I got involved in the outdoor retail business, which actually led me to Build-A-Bear. And it really, as early as in the outdoor retail business, I just started noticing that there were certain things I was able to accomplish with people and teams, and often teams I had never met before, and sometimes with language barriers that I could accomplish in the mountains that I really struggle with in business. So getting people more engaged and getting them on the same page or same focus, building momentum day in and day out in life and business and all these challenges, building stronger relationships. So I started reverse engineering, what made this work in the mountains, and then were mountain situations where I had, what I thought was a perfect partner. And then I get on the mountain or the wall and find out that they weren't a perfect partner. Same as in business, right? This happens a lot. We struggle to find someone, we hire them, and this is the one. And then you end up like a year later, they're like they robbed the company or something. I don't know. It's not always that dramatic, right? But often it's not what you expected. So I just started trying to reverse engineer that and figure out why is that, and how can my climbing experiences inform my business life and my personal life. And then people started asking me to share my experiences. So in the speaking environment, the funny thing is the first at least 5 years, I really had no idea I didn't know what a professional speaker was or what they did. I just put my slides, my photo slides, on an old reel, click, click, click. I would show them and talk about the trips. But people came up to me like, that's really compelling and inspiring. I'm like, oh, can you come talk to our group? And like, okay, sure. And then the first one actually out of the gate asked me, I can only pay you $150. So it's like, okay. It was really stunning. It was pretty exciting. So yeah, so the climbing, the business life and the personal life and the family piece, which are very much tied into my climbing and my experiences. And we have a really, really tight family unit and very, very close and share a lot of adventures. Actually, I'm super proud right now. Both my kids are out on spring break, each out on their own. My son's in California. He's been doing more of the beach, take it easy vacation. And our daughter's out on her first trip with her girlfriend, roommate from college, and doing her own camping trip in Moab, Utah on her own. And a little nerve wracking. She's driving back right now in some snow. So I'm like, sure she's going to be fine, but it's cool. Proud moment to see him go out there and enjoy the outdoors in this case, without me being there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I really have, I was really getting more and more excited to kind of chat with you today, because the more I read about your career and the more I was looking on your website and the more I was reading your book, particularly the book, because as I'm sitting there reading it, and I'm reading all the trials and tribulations that got you to that big vertical climb, and just the realization after you got back that the area in the world that you were in was a hotbed for terrorism, and how actually dangerous it was, which is a whole other topic in and by itself. Yeah. But it was such a metaphor for life to me, because almost at every turn, you had to raise the money to go. You had to figure out when you were going to go. You had to plan when you were going to go. And then everything fell apart on the way there. And then your luggage didn't come. And then, you had to find supplies and paying, cabbies, I'll put that in quotes, in the countryside. And so I guess I've got one overarching kind of crazy question, which is, how the heck did you keep going when every single thing got in your way, from almost the time you stepped foot in the airport to the time you started climbing on the mountain? What was your mindset around that?
Yeah, so I think part of this, I think I was born with part of this drive, and I think environment, of course, too, has a lot to do with it. So I don't want to take too much credit for it, because I think I sort of showed up driven and pretty engaged in life. And for me, it's been, I guess once I get, I'm sort of stubborn in a sense, I guess, that once I get something in my mind and I really dream about it a lot, and in this case, climbing was just, I had so many really amazing experiences climbing that preceded the trip. So I knew how it was I had a sense of how amazing it would feel to accomplish a climb in a really remote area. And I've never done anything at that level, that far in such a weird part of the world, where it's, 3 days from a third world hospital. I mean, you're really remote. And you're really hosed if something goes wrong. If you have an accident or something, you're on your own. There's no cell phone service or anything in that region of the world. So Central Asia in this case. So for me, the ultimate thing is a burning desire, like, I've got to do this. I got to do this. And there's a lot that goes into figuring that out for people. That's one thing people ask me, is like, how do I know? We have to. I think it rarely just. Occasionally, people can just get a flash of insight, right? It just shows up. But I think we have to be intentional about creating space for reflecting, and whether that's church or meditate. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but it can be physical. Being outside and being active, or being in a spiritual environment, or meditating, or journaling, or being with people who really nurture you and bring out your best. But being intentional about setting it up. Right, we're so busy in our lives. I don't see that time happening. We have to fight for it, right, in our day, and anchor that to the ideal at the beginning of the day. So we can create space for this to come to us, and to be aware of it, and then also to immerse us in our passions, right? So for me, I was really into climbing, so I was reading all these magazines. I just get really kind of obsessive about things I get passionate about. So that's what led to me getting this one objective and goal in mind. And then I think once you commit that deeply and you start pursuing it, if you really want it, you'll push through obstacles, right? And I think people, even almost everybody that hears me speak or has read my book or whatever, they're like, well, I don't know if I've ever done that. And if I have a chance to coach them or have a conversation with them, there's usually all kinds of moments like that, right? If they're parents, or even whether the parents are not, or career, personal life, everybody's got crap they've been through to get something they wanted and that they thought they may never be able to get, right? We've all made through struggles. For that matter, like right now, I mean, if you're watching this, you made it through the pandemic, or you're almost through the pandemic. We don't know how, I feel like the light's at the end of the tunnel. We just don't know how far the tunnel is, but
Right.
we're certainly on the other side of the horror and the not knowing anything last fall. Think about it 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
How different and better we are right now. Perspective is everything. So, I mean, we've made it through a lot. So that's another technique I encourage people to do, is recall previous struggles, and when you broke through and you made something happen. So I think we've all done more than we think we have, and also feel like we can all do more than what we think's possible. And I don't mean like more like make more money, do more stuff, but more meaningful work, or volunteerism, or being a better friend or parent or coach or whatever that is, or doctor, dentist, and maybe some of the people watching in your audience. There's always opportunity for us to show up and maybe just honor ourselves more, right? One thing I found people, like I think a lot of your potential audience is people who are oriented for service and basically live the lives of serving others in some way. And like in this case, maybe a healthcare or otherwise, they often don't build the support they need for themselves to really nurture and support those dreams and those passions. So getting those people, we talk more about that, but building the relationships to support you and being able to step out of your comfort zone and do that. But back to the first point, I mean, we have to create space for these things. We don't get clarity without space. And just really hard to do this. I just want to acknowledge it, right? It's hard for me to, I just had my 1,000th day in a row meditating this past Tuesday. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm not an intentional, like rigid, consistent person. It's just really unusual for me. That's the only thing I've ever done 1,000 days in a row. I mean, maybe get up and brush my teeth. I don't know. It's probably a day I didn't brush my teeth on. Some climb somewhere in the last 1,000 days. I probably missed brushing my teeth. Just to be super transparent. But anyway, I hope that, I don't know if that answered your question. There's
I think
a lot in there.
And it's fascinating to me because you're a very driven person. And what I heard was you were very inspired by your goal. You were very focused by your goal. You were supported by your relationships. You leaned on those relationships, and you created the space for which to lean in to opportunity in the face of obstacle. And so when you encountered your bags might not make it, and I think it was the Turkish Air employee that ended up being able to get your bags there, and just all these kind of crazy things. Like I'm sitting here reading it and talk about like writing out a paper ticket. Like when the heck was the last time that happened? And so, although I do remember that as a kid, I'm old enough to remember that.
They still have. But side notes, I have one handwritten in around 2015 or 16. So they do still have them.
Wow.
I didn't
when their systems go down, right?
Yeah.
So I think, what I'd love to talk a little bit about is, kind of that moment, that decision moment. And you shared, well, it's just the way I'm wired. It's just what I do. By the same token, there are certainly decisions that you made to keep moving forward. And so, when people come to you as a coach or a mentor and they feel kind of stuck because things aren't going the way they want to, like what do you end up sharing with them to help them kind of start to see things differently?
Yeah, a couple of things. One thing that's really helpful and powerful is to do a retroactive. You can do this on an annual basis or even just retro in life, especially when we're feeling like we're struggling or we just feel down or we don't have clarity. It's one of my vertical lessons in the book is celebrate the summits, right? And the most obvious part of that is on the fly when it happens to celebrate even little summits. Like right now, getting through even at this point in this pandemic, that making it through another day, things that normally wouldn't be worth celebrating could be worth celebrating right now, right? Just like there's tons of examples, right? I don't know, people, I don't have young kids in the house. So there's so many people dealing with, much more challenging situations, but making it through another day could be worth celebrating. But doing that retroactively is really powerful as well. Just sitting down and putting if you're resistant to it, put a timer on 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes and just brainstorm with a pen and paper or keyboard. What are some accomplishments in your life? and another related exercise, I do this in group workshops, is to help people get a kind of a topographical ups and down view of their life expedition. So, and I ask them so I want you to reflect and map out some high points and some low points in your life up to this point. What got you here, right? And it literally physically, I see people will draw a line and it kind of show where they feel like they are now.
Yeah.
And in that is sort of what we said originally. You're gonna uncover not only the low points, but low points that you made it through, right? So getting some perspective and realizing that you've done a lot probably already, and giving yourself some credit for that can fuel just enough inspiration and clarity for you to at least optimize your mindset and your head around, okay, I've done some hard things. I've made through some trials and tribulations in my life. And then another exercise related to that, as far as trying to figure out what do I really want to do, or what I want to do something more meaningful. So my wife is at a stage right now, and a crossroad, I guess, and trying to figure this out for her. She's had some meaningful work raising our children and taking care of a lady with Alzheimer's and other people. So she's more trying to figure out what she wants to do next, right? But going back and just asking yourself, what are some things that have brought me joy? Activities or people or certain places in the world. I think trying to keep the parameters down and just a completely open-ended question to start is a lot more helpful than saying, what's the funnest job I ever had, or the time that I made money to it, to leave that piece out, all the normal variables that we constrict, so that we can just get creative and open up to just maybe there was something you did 10 years ago or 5, I volunteered this, or I was involved in this, or what are some of those peak experience moments? And in that can give us clues on, well, if that was fun, maybe very simply, maybe just doing one of those things again could be really helpful and meaningful, and being open to that and kind of just stumbling through, because it's really not right. It's not a straight line. It's not like, okay, if you ask this question, you're going to discover this, and boom. So exactly. I think being aware of that too, and being patient, but I think so many of us, and I've caught myself there too, just we sit back on it and we're like, I don't know what to do. So you don't get moving at all. So just starting to explore and starting to go back and maybe try to repeat some experiences, or go visit a place again, or reconnect with a person who brought you joy. That can start helping you explore it. And then if you pay attention and you journal some or record some of the insights you have, that's really frustrating too. Like so many times in my life, I figured it out before. I have the aha, and then even if it's something simple like, I don't know, a blog article idea or somebody I want to contact, and if I don't write it down pretty quickly, I mean, life's coming at you, and 2 hours later, 2 days later, like, I was so clear on what that was. It's gone now. So I think the insight can be fleeting. We need to make sure we grab it when it comes along.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. I had a professor in dental school, and I quote him all the time to this day, Dr. Bud Hawley, and he said, "A short pencil is better than a long memory." And so I follow that very closely, and have now switched to electronic means because they're searchable. I wish I figured that out a lot longer ago, because they've been out for a while, but it's a really useful tool. And I love what you said about taking the time. I'll use one of your phrases, to give yourself space to think about the trajectory of your life, and realize that it's not this linear progression, that there are these ups and downs, and so many people get stuck not only in their present moment, but they also kind of forget all of those small wins that got them to where they are today.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember one time I had one of my private coaching clients, and we worked on this one element, this one issue for a long time. And then the next session, I was like, so how's it going? Et cetera, et cetera. Didn't even talk about it. I go, wait a minute, what about this? And he goes, oh, I did that. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. It's like, how many sessions did we work on the fact that you couldn't do it? And now you just be like, oh, well, I just did it. It's such an interesting thing that we do as humans, right? We suffer through, and then we do it, and we're like, yeah, it's no big deal, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about too is kind of your first night sleeping on the side of a mountain. And I'm trying to picture this, and I'm trying to think about this as a metaphor for life, trusting, your ropes and your rigging and all that kind of stuff. And just the very idea of like sleeping vertically, I still can't even wrap my brain around it. So So would you mind just kind of, first of all, explaining what I'm actually referring to, because not everybody may understand, but
Yeah.
also kind of walk us through kind of your thought process, maybe the first night you slept on the side of it, literally on the side of a mountain.
This
So,
is fun because I don't think anybody's asked me specifically about, what was the first night like and how that kind of all came about. When I very first started climbing, about 6 months into my, when I first started climbing, I met a guy who's still a good friend of mine, and we stay in touch. His name's Travis Moore, and he actually lives in Phoenix. But anyway, so Travis said, man, did you know that there's walls so big that you have to climb all day and you still won't make it to the top? You have to sleep on the side of the wall and just day and day after day after day to get to the top. And I said, I'd never heard of this. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah. He said, like El Capitan in Yosemite, it's huge, 3,000 feet. And I was, wow, it just was mind blowing. And it immediately intrigued me.
mm-hmm.
And I mean, watch out for that, right? That's a little sign, right? When we hear something that's interesting, and go and just, especially we have the internet, so learn more about it. Back then I had to go find a book and drive all across town to find this one little book to learn more about it. It wasn't easy to. But the more I read about this big wall climbing where you live on the wall for days, the more I became really obsessed with it. I didn't know how to do it. Didn't know if I could physically do it. But what really caught my attention and my dreams was the experience of living on the wall. So I just thought it'd be super cool to camp on the side of the wall in the vertical, right? So on bigger objectives, when the wall's just too, for whatever reason, the wall or the snow and ice, if it's too big, but the vertical walls especially, people kind of freak out when they see the portaledge photos. I can send you a photo that you can put in the post. So it's like a cot that you clip into the wall, right? And if you've seen photos of these, most people have, but they're really small. They're just wide enough for your shoulder. So a two-person version is 4x6 or so, and some 6.5 feet long. And you lay on this thing and you sleep. You just put it together. The poles all fit together, and you sleep on it. And then you try to sleep on it. You're pretty tired though, so usually it's pretty easy to sleep on it. And you stay. This is the number one question I get whenever I talk about sleeping on the side of the wall: is you always stay tied in with a rope, right? So if the portaledge were to collapse, I've only had this happen one time. If it were to collapse, your rope's going to stop you from falling. Right. So you do have a leash, so to speak. Now the other option is there are some routes in the world that have natural ledges that you can sleep on of varying quality. Sometimes they're great. There's these really famous ledges in Yosemite as an example that are some are so big you can put a car on them. Some are horrible. So the very first time I slept up in the vertical was on a route called the west face of the Leaning Tower in Yosemite. And if you're familiar with Yosemite, anybody watching this, if you look at when you come through the Discovery Tunnel view, there's all the most amazing place in the world in your sights. On the far right, there's Bridalveil Falls. Mm-hmm. And to the right of that, there's a tower that's super, super steep. And it's actually the steepest big wall in North America, most continuously steep big wall in North America. And miraculously, there's these little ledges sliced into the side of it that are really level and really, really nice, relatively nice. So I was so psyched about that experience and fired up about what it would be like to live on the wall that it drove me to literally drive to Yosemite and by myself try to find a partner in the parking lot. And I ran into this amazing climber. He was a professional climber for many years named Sean Easton. And we became really good buddies. And so he's like, I'll climb it with you. I've done it before. Let's go. So we got up there and I just remember being fun. And the really twisted part about it is there was really crappy weather. I almost said that word, but really crappy weather coming in. It was like raining the whole time. Basically, right after we started the climb, it started raining. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to the top. And he said, let's go to the top. Mm-hmm. So I was just really fired up about the experience. I was so drawn to how magical I thought the experience would be that I was willing to do just about anything to get there. So being up on the ledge, we met two other climbers that night who were actually kind of freaked out. One of those guys actually ended up becoming a full-time professional climber as well, named Sean Isaacs, an amazing climber as well out of Canada. But they were kind of psyched out. Sean and his buddy were like, we're thinking about going down. And my friend Sean, the other Canadian, was like, no, you can do it. You made it this far. It's kind of overhanging. You won't get that much rain on you. Although we were sitting there wet. We just got them fired up. And I was so excited about being there. They're like, all right, well, I guess we'll keep going. So we really inspired each other to keep going. So we just had a good time. We had like a party, basically. It's a really special when you can be in a place and you don't have to climb the side of some steep cliff. We've all had experiences in our lives where even your local park or some national park, or you visit a special place or beach or a fishing spot or whatever that is for you. And you have a little moment where you're just connected to the source, the earth, whatever you want to believe in. And it just feels amazing, right? And it was like that times 100 for me, like a super ample, because definitely have there's maybe some adrenaline pieces to it that euphoric, right? You're really flying high very naturally in a very natural way. And so I remember it not being scary at all. And I remember just being super, super excited about being in this really wild, special place that not a lot of people get to experience. And you see birds flying down below you. I don't think I would have noticed all that. I think this is maybe a little side lesson for everyone. When you're out on that hike or you're out on that climb or whatever you're doing, if we don't pause and have time to soak it all in, I've done that. I've had that. I now live in the mountains in Colorado, and it's kind of getting spoiled because I have access to amazing places all the time. But I have caught myself like going up to Horsetooth Reservoir here in Fort Collins as an example, and just kind of going through the motions. I'm going on the hike, but I'm not. So maybe the dog's with me, so I'm not maybe pausing to be intentional about it and attentive, and make it almost a contemplative practice. My meditation coach had a lesson for me today on this. That's kind of on my mind. But being intentional and pausing and breathing and just being more present, because I think we're wired and we respond to our environment to just go through it with such,
absolutely
fury that we can miss those fulfilling moments. So really that's what it was about. To tie it back to sleeping on the wall that first night was about really soaking up the experience. And in that case, I was 21, I think, at the time. Mm-hmm. And it just all lined up, and it just made me want to do it more.
Yeah. Well, if I may, once again, it follows the same theme. You had the passion, you had the focus, and then you had the support of the people around you. Granted, you just met them in the parking lot, which, kudos to you, but yet it was still the people that were helped to support you, encourage you, and so forth. And so I'd love to kind of turn the conversation a little bit and talk about Build-A-Bear Workshop specifically related to the comments in your bio about culture. And so, from going to 40 stores to over 400 stores, I do remember, by the way, just to say, it was probably really, really early 2000s in the Columbia Mall in Columbia, Maryland. And they opened up this store. I'm like, what is this? And it was just mobbed, right, with all these little boys and girls. And it's really, it is a revolutionary concept and certainly has done well. And what I'm really curious about is the cultural aspects and why it was voted as such a great place to work. And because in large part, there's some mirrors to themes here, right? Supporting one another, having a common cause. You're not going to build a culture without a vision and people to support the vision. So talk to us a little bit about kind of where the culture started and kind of how it grew and your part in that.
Yeah. So the way it started was Maxine Clark, the founder of Build-A-Bear, had this relatively crazy idea at the time. And she had a really extensive, very successful retail career behind her already. She probably didn't need to start another company, and she probably could have retired at that point in her life, but she had this, she's just a natural entrepreneur and had this idea sparked by her neighbor. So this young gal next door, she used to hang out with her and was kind of a mentor and a friend of these kids next door. And her neighbor, Katie, she was trying to come up with a retail idea. The thing, what it really tied back to when she was a kid, and my dad has also commented on this, people of the next generation up. And so when they were young, going to retail, going shopping was a full experience. And she remembered like Macy's and just going to the store. And it was just really special when she was young. And she felt like that had been lost and retail had become so transactional and just, best price, get them out the door, all that sort of thing. She wanted to bring the experience back to retail. So that was kind of what she was searching for. And then her neighbor helped her come up with the idea of the bears specifically. What I don't know if she realized how I suspect she didn't get it until she saw it in action, how magical and meaningful the experience was going to be. I need to ask her this. But I'm sure she thought it might be meaningful, but I think we all were surprised, or she certainly was, that how meaningful the experience was for people. And there's something about a teddy bear is endearing and, to the American people, right? So the magic piece comes in really with the experience. And that's really what made Build-A-Bear successful. And it's really a secret to the culture. So I'll explain what I mean by that. and that when Maxine went out and tried to get some investments in the initial rounds, most people told her, well, teddy bear's a commodity item. You can get one anywhere. I don't get it. And it's not about the teddy bear at all. I mean, it happens to be the object of the process, but it's not about the teddy bear. It's about the experience.
Yep.
And specifically, it's about that people were creating meaningful experiences. And a friend of mine and another colleague early in the days of Build-A-Bear, he's actually the guy that trained me. When we first opened our store, this is a little lesson actually for business leaders out there. When I started at the company, every single person that came through the door, no matter where you worked in the organization, you had to go through a full manager training. So at that time, it was 2 weeks. So I literally it was a small training room, and it was like, I think about 12 of us in there. All of the 11 other people were going out to run their own stores. And we were growing really quickly at that time and opened up a lot of stores. So even though I was going to be sitting in IT running business systems and implementing and improving business processes and service initially, I still had to go through a full manager training. So it was, then I get to see, what I was going to say, the trainer who, Jeff Marks, was the guy who was training us at that time. He actually invented what we call the heart ceremony. So when he was in the store as a store manager, he just saw this opportunity. Maxine, I think, had the idea to put the heart in the bear. But then he said, what if we just really went over the top and made this whole experience of putting the heart in the bear really meaningful for people? So what was really, really wonderful about this is that, that Maxine encouraged all of us to help. She had the idea and definitely created the culture initially, but I've pushed back on her in the past when updating my bio and stuff. She's like, why don't you have Fortune 100 best companies in there? I'm like, well, that's not me. That was you. She's like, no, but you and everyone who spoke up and took part and led any size team or any effort, you all helped me create it and scale it. And that's the magic. So that's really hard to do, right? We can talk about that some too. But so at first it's about the experience and her being open and saying, oh, when Jeff brought this, when she saw how he was doing the heart experience and how amazing and how meaningful it meant to the kids and the families doing it, she's like, oh, maybe this should become standard, right? And it did. It became part of every training and still is part of every Build-A-Bear built in person, anywhere in the world. So being open to that and seeking that, but coming back to really she would drive home and really made sure that all of us were obsessed with the experience. So that question was the beginning and the start of every single conversation about pretty much everything we did. And things that seemingly have nothing to do with the customer experience do, right? So for me, especially in my early years when I was focused on software and all the business systems with my boss and partner, every question we ask, okay, if we change, as an example, point of sale, how does this affect the customer experience? And sometimes it's not obvious, but you've got to figure out what's most valuable, most important for you in that culture, even if it's a little team. And then you got to relentlessly be obsessive about bringing people back to that. But does this in this case, does this increase and improve our customer experience, make it more meaningful, more efficient, or does it impact it in some negative way? Couple quick examples for you that choices we made when those questions were asked. So in store build outs, we always tried to build out our restroom to be accessible to the public. So depending on the code in the region, stores, usually that's a higher standard. Not always, sometimes it's the same, but often we'd have to spend a little more money or a lot more money to create an accessible bathroom. A lot of people don't even allow your customer to use the restroom, right? Which is fairly ridiculous. I get it in some areas, it can be challenging, but even in New York City, we're going to let people use the restroom. And that's what would you say if somebody comes in your home and they ask you to use the restroom? You say, of course, right?
It's down the hall.
So that she continually and relentlessly pounded that into our, made sure that we stayed aligned to that and we stayed focused on that. And so, they hired people who got that, right? So I remember telling the CFO in this meeting, my interview, that I wanted to love the people I worked with because we spend more time with the people we work with than most of our other people in our lives. And, and she was like, "Really, what?" So finding people who get that and who really align with your values. We know this, and most business leaders get this, but I think we compromise too much on it. We go, "Well, I need a body. I got to fill this position," and we really, really, really push back and really, and we checked each other sometimes. I remember I had a situation where we wanted to hire someone in, and they were really technically qualified, but our CFO said, they said they hadn't been to a store and they just had this real smart aleck response. It's in the book, but a really smart aleck response to, yeah, well, I'll go to a store if you give, if you make me an offer. Just wasn't the right fit. And she pushed back on it. I said, no, he's not a good fit. He doesn't fit it's not going to fit our culture. Because even internally, this is the piece on the culture too. The customer experience we focused on in the store was also relentlessly focused on in our headquarters, right? So like our onboarding process, how do our employees and team members feel about working here? And how connected are they to the experience we're creating? So something else that Maxine did from day one, at least when I showed up, was she would bring a few emails to every team meeting, to every all hands meeting, which we did weekly at the time, and read emails, responses from real guests in our stores about the experiences they had.
That's awesome.
And so she constantly, we learned to constantly stay connected to why we were there. And that was about the experience we were creating in the store, even if you were in the headquarters or bear quarters. So it's about the experience and being obsessive about it and knowing what that is for your organization. And I can't think of any organization that the experience is not important, right? So that's I almost feel like to be competitive, whether you're a dentist or whatever you do, that piece has to be there. If you ignore that, you're going to get nailed, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just listening to one of Simon Sinek's YouTube videos, and he was talking about a Starbucks coming into a community. And he was making this whole case. It's like, is Starbucks competing with a mom and pop, or is the mom and pop competing with itself? Because, there's not everybody that likes Starbucks coffee, but it's about the experience. And the mom and pop, in many cases, may have better coffee, particularly better coffee to a certain person's palate. But when you walk in there and the couch is still ripped from 1986, it says something. And so are they really competing with the mom and pop, or are the mom and pops competing with themselves? And it's all about culture and the client experience and how you make them feel, right? In the heart space, even more than the mind of the pocket.
Absolutely.
As it was. So it sounds like there's an ever recurring theme for your own personal experiences as well as your business experiences around, true passion, focus, and really keeping your eye on the bigger picture. And so many people can get lost in the minutia of the individual setbacks of the day. I often talk about James Clear's work, Atomic Habits, because he has this wonderful graph of the valley of disappointment, because most people think that, your trajectory is going to be linear, but it's actually like this. And, most people stop because they hit a setback, and that's not something you've done. So I think that's truly admirable and frankly fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure there's examples where I have given up on stuff. Usually it's by intentional though. I don't talk about this in the book, I don't think, but in some of my programs I've talked about, there's several, actually one really significant climb I did in Nepal. It was significant for me at least, but I didn't actually summit. We made it close to the summit, and we made a decision based on safety and conditions at the time. But I've never looked, it felt like it was kind of a miraculously successful trip, and logistics and a lot of things that have to come together. So sometimes we can decide, okay, I'm going to bail on this. But I think doing it for the right reason, in your heart, right? When you gave up because you wimped out, or you lost motivation, or you quit for the right reasons, right? So there's ways you can do that are actually you will never regret, versus letting yourself down and giving up when you knew you had a little more in the tank.
Absolutely. So you kind of bring me to an interesting place. So if somebody's watching this and they're trying to decide if they're going to give up what they're doing or not, how would you advise somebody to kind of look at that situation, kind of like as you just described, but a little bit more deeply? How would you advise somebody to kind of look at where they are today to really make the decision? Should I give up for the right reasons, or am I giving up just because, I'm giving up? What would you say to somebody?
So are you talking in the context of people exploring other things they might want to do, or
other things, or even me right here, right now, talking to you, I launched this YouTube channel, and I'm certainly not a celebrity or some famous person. And so it takes a while to get traction. We were talking about this before we hit the record button. And there's so many people that kind of get stuck. They go just a little farther, or they hit a setback after success. And they're just like, all right, I can't do this anymore, or somebody's trying to tell me something, or,
Yeah.
just end up getting frustrated with the situation rather than potentially the reality. So,
Yeah.
somebody came to you and said, "I'm thinking of giving up. Well, how do you help
Yeah.
me?" What would you do?
I'll address that part of it and then roll back a little bit because I
Mhm.
think there's people probably in one of two phases at least. One is maybe where you are at that, and I'm in some of those phases as well with my business too. Not that I'm going to give up, but just wondering like,
Yeah.
So then also I wanted to mention a little bit about people don't know, and like we were talking about earlier, like, well, maybe I'd like to do this. I don't know what I'm really driven, or what my calling? Why am I here? Or maybe you're doing work, but you don't feel fulfilled, as an example. But
Mhm.
as far as getting discouraged and where you are, I think ultimately I always ask the first vertical lesson in the book is decide if it's worth it, right? And then getting really specific and writing it down. Why would it be worth it to do this?
Yep.
Right. Even before you started. And then when you're in it, and especially when you're in the funk, right, in the belly of the beast, as
Yep.
Stephen Pressfield, here's a tip: read Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art.
Okay.
Really great book. He's a famous writer, and he talks about, and it doesn't have to be writing. He calls, six-pack abs, starting a business venture, having a kid, climbing a mountain, doing something you sense is gonna move you forward and
Yep.
inspire you, and try to get specific about why. But when you're in the belly of the beast, as he calls it, uh, going back to that, and why would it be worth it? Why should I keep going? And ask yourself, and go back to your original writing or your notes on why you were so fired up about it, and try to really revisit that
Mhm.
and see if it's still worth it, and try to remember what the payoff is. The
Mhm.
second part of that is knowing that it's such a long play. I think life is a long play.
Yep.
So much, and as Americans, we've gotten, Amazon spoils us. We get, order it and you get it like that. We have so many things that are just, we want it now and we want to get results now, or come on. We're just wired that way. So I think it's difficult to really remember that it's a long play.
Mhm.
And podcast, business, career, life, fulfillment, all those things. I mean, they're a long play. So knowing that going in, this is going to be a long game, and not expecting overnight success, and knowing that comes from showing up. I mean, you hear this all the time from people who are an overnight success, and they're like, that
Yeah.
really frustrates them. Usually you'll hear them in an interview, they're like, dude, I've been grinding at
Exactly.
this years, decades, right? And then you maybe just recently heard about me, but I've been
Exactly.
pounding away. So so knowing it's going to be a long play. And then on the part about around not knowing what maybe I'd like to do this. I don't know. Maybe I want to do this, or go. What I've done. I mean, there's probably at least 10. My wife reminded me the other day. She's like, "What about all these little businesses ideas you actually started or you?" Because
Mhm.
my son's an entrepreneur, and recently I said I'm not really an entrepreneur, and because I'm not a serial entrepreneur, but I sort of am a failing serial entrepreneur. And most of them I never really launched, but I
Mhm.
incorporated a few things and made business cards up, even way back to my college days. But what my point here is that explore it and check it out. And
Yeah.
so, good example for me, when I was in the outdoor retail business, I thought I wanted to own a climbing gym. I thought maybe that would be a good thing for me to explore. And so when you get the idea, most people, like, I don't know, maybe more people look into stuff on Google, but I just want to encourage you to explore it more. Like, check it out. Well, what's it look like? What do people, how do you do it? And then even better than just looking at information on the internet, try to find somebody in your network who's done it.
Yep.
Right. And then go to them humbly with your ego in check and say, and buy them lunch. People try to want to
Yeah.
pick your brain, take you to lunch, and then you
Yeah.
buy their lunch. It's like, wait a second, to buy their lunch. I used to have this. I haven't done it in a while because we haven't been in person. But I had a rule at the beginning of my speaking business for most of the years. Every month, I tried to have lunch with a really successful person and a millionaire, maybe even, not that's about just the money piece, but take a millionaire to lunch. And when I mean take a millionaire to lunch, like, I'm going to buy him lunch, and I'm
Right.
not a millionaire yet, but and people are like, well, she or he could pay you. Why'd you buy them lunch? Like, no, you don't get it. These people are giving you time and giving you, and mentorship, or even answering a simple question. The least you can do
Yeah.
is, sorry to go on a rant. So, anyway, but go explore and figure out, like the climbing gym thing. I had an old friend, my wife and I, who's upper limits climbing gyms in the St. Louis and Illinois area. We'd known him for years, and he had just one climbing gym at the time. So I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can I come up and talk to you about a climbing gym?" And he and his wife sat down and gave us, everything they could, poured into me, and here's all the good, bad, and ugly,
Mhm.
et cetera. And based on that information, more research, I decided not to do it. But
Got
the
it.
cool thing about that is when you do that, if you just run it out and see, look, what would it look like? And if you decide based on your research not to pursue it, then it's not haunting you anymore.
Yeah,
So I never have to worry for the rest of my life. What if I'd opened a climbing gym?
absolutely.
I never wondered about that because I already know. I looked into it. I looked into opening a music store and a guitar store because I'm a musician. Decided not to.
Yep.
There's probably 10 or 20 things that I thought, what if I did that?
Yep.
I really run them out and then talk to a couple, at least one or two people to just make a decision. And that's just kind of part of the process. But I want to definitely explore it and don't just wonder. So
No, I think that's a great answer. And in some ways you could almost reframe what you said relative to pursue it enough so that you'd never regret not pursuing it, because you did what you had to do to really make the right decision to say, you know what, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm going to leave this the way it is. So
right.
it's
It also encourages you to get out of the fear piece because, like, if you think, well, I'm going to look into like opening a climbing gym in this example, instead it wasn't. I was like, I'm just looking into this, right? So when the little fear voice comes up, you can be like, well, I'm just checking it out. I'm never going to quit my day job and become a professional speaker.
Yeah,
That's crazy. Who would do that? So I'm just checking it out, and that's actually how the speaking thing came about too. I started dipping my feet in it, exploring it more, and then yeah.
That's great. No, that's fantastic. As it's been so much fun chatting with you, and we could probably go on for hours, frankly. But I am curious about one thing, kind of as we wrap up. There's 9 vertical lessons in your book, and you have a whole life story and a whole, as we all do, large amount of life experience. And so I'm kind of curious to ask you, and it's maybe a little bit of a tough question, so bear with me. Of all your vertical lessons or your lessons in life, what do you think is one of your most valuable lessons that you've learned?
This is a really good question, and I have the answer. For me, it's vertical lesson number 3 in the book: get on belay. Right. So everything I've accomplished in my life, as a child, as an adult, as a parent, in all contexts, on mountains and in business, have always been. All those successes would have never come without someone having their back, my back, right, and having me on belay. So I'll explain what that means. Belay is BELAY, and that word is used to describe the mechanical process that we use to hold the rope for each other, and most importantly, stop the rope from moving through the device. It's much like rappelling. Lots more people have rappelled than climbed. So it's actually the same mechanical process. You're moving a rope through something that you can introduce friction and stop the rope from moving. So that person, literally, when we're climbing and you're literally stepping up into the unknown. You're trying to lead into the unknown, literally, physically, mentally. Someone's got the rope in their hands down there for you, right? And often they're out of sight, but you're literally connected with this lifeline ahead. The one I use. This is the one I used in Central Asia, a piece of this rope. But you have this in your hands, and I can give you a quick little framework to make this really actionable for people, because I want people to be able to use the idea. Being a good belay, and first of all, we all need this, right? This is something I think we underestimate how important this is, especially people of service or out there just running and doing the grind. Take the time to step back in the morning and check your heart and your head and see who the first person that pops in your mind. Who do you need on belay? Who do you need support from? And then reach out to that person and just let them know, hey, I was thinking of you today. Or I got your back, or thank you for being so supportive to me. I hope you're well. Whatever your language is, I often will say, I got you on belay, Martin. And so there's a few quick key steps. One is to be present and let them know and encourage them, right? And even as a mentor to you, you can just be acknowledging that, right? Saying, thanks for having my back. I appreciate you. You never know when that person, like your mentor, your hero, might be feeling in the dumps, and it could be just what they need. And then there are 2 pieces that happen tactically when we're climbing that are very, very dangerous and can get in the way of not only safe climbing, but you can't make progress. One is when you have too much rope out, you have too much slack, right? So if you have too much slack out when the person's climbing, we expect they're going to fall. And then we design a system so that when they fall, they don't hurt themselves. So when there's too much rope out, they fall, then they hurt themselves, right? So for me in business and life, this is when I have an uncomfortable conversation that I put off and don't want to have. Right? More slack. And then the opposite of that's also very critical in when you hold the rope too tight, right? Micromanaging, as we call it in in the business world.
Yeah.
Literally, so the lead climber, you hold the rope, the belay too tight, the lead climber can't advance,
Yes.
and sometimes they'll try and make a move and they'll fall. And then the fourth part and the most important piece is that because you're attentive and you're on belay, when you see that they fall, you have to lock the rope off so that it arrests their fall and stops them, and they can recover and get back on the wall. So that little framework and that mindset is just a different, two little lenses to look through there. Is, you could ask yourself, who do I have too much slack out with on my team, as an example, or in my life? Somebody you haven't contacted in a while, you need to reach out to. I've got 3 friends on the top of my mind that they've been on my list for too long, that I've got too much slack out, and I've got to reconnect with them and get back on the way. Just being transparent. I'm human. I'm trying to practice this every day. So, and then if I hold the rope too tight for someone, smothering or micromanaging, or for whatever reason, so the belay is definitely the one. It's about relationships and being intentional and being outbound, intentional, meaningful connections day in and day out.
No, I think that's fantastic. And, looking out for people, especially in this day and age, is more important than ever. That's for sure.
Absolutely. We need that encouragement, and more than ever.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Well, Manley, thank you so very much for joining us today. I'll post Manley's information in the area below. So please, I hope you enjoyed our interview today. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the notification button so you don't miss any of our interviews, book reviews, or heart to hearts. And remember, life speaks to you. And if you think it doesn't, you're not listening. Take care, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.